This event is being put on by both the League of Women Voters of San Diego and the League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego, who have been working hard on the topic of housing. What I'd like to do is mention that we have many events coming up for both leagues in the coming months, especially with the primary election on June 2nd. And please look at the websites for both of our leagues to get more details. I also want to say that the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose any candidates, but we do take stands on certain issues that we have researched carefully. So I would like to turn this over now to Mary Thompson and Miles Pomeroy, who are the co-chairs of our Housing Committee.
Well, thank you, Jane, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters' second webinar in the past 2 weeks on housing. My name is Mary Thompson, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters North County, San Diego, and I'm also the co-chair of the League's Housing and Homelessness Interest Group. Part of the League's mission is to study and advocate on issues in the public interest, and housing surely qualifies for that. We've seen numerous laws to reform regulations and land use to address the housing shortage. Attention in Sacramento seems to be shifting to address construction costs. The idea of industrialized construction as a pathway to reduce construction costs is taking hold. Our focus tonight, new in town, factory-built housing, seems very timely. Tonight, we're going to hear from 3 San Diego leaders pursuing housing innovation, representing the City of San Diego, a design firm, LPA Design Studios, and a developer, Impact Housing. Our first speaker will be Gary Geiler. He's the director of the City of San Diego's Development Services Department. He oversees the Land Development and Building Construction Division. He is the liaison to the Office of the Mayor and the City Council for Development and Permitting. His department formed a working group on factory-built housing and publishes an information bulletin on the city's website. Our second speaker will be Matt Winter of LPA Design Studios. He's the director of mixed-use projects. He's responsible for management of projects using multiple typologies. You'll hear more about that from him. An example is the Family Health Center El Cerrito Mixed-Use Modular Housing Project. It won the 2025 award for residential design from the American Institute of Architects. Matt is a longtime member of the San Diego Historical Resources Board and is the co-founder of Beautiful PB, a nonprofit managing certification of Pacific Beach's Eco District. Our third speaker will be Eduardo Santana of Impact Housing. He's the Chief Communications Officer, managing relationships and spearheading large-scale multifamily projects which utilize innovative delivery methods and affordability. There are many examples of Impact Housing projects around the city, in Grantville, in the College area, on Market Street, and on Adams Avenue. So our agenda tonight, each of the speakers will talk for about 10 minutes, and then they'll take your questions until about 6:30. Do add your questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I think we are all interested to learn more about this exciting new possibility and what it means for San Diego. So let's begin with you, Gary. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Gary Geiler. I'm the Assistant Director at the Development Services Department. The Director is Elise Lowe, and I do oversee the staff that review current planning, zoning, and environmental, as well as building review and inspection of factory-built housing. What is factory-built housing? Factory-built housing is a residential building, a dwelling unit, or a building component that is manufactured off-site, such that the parts or the processes during the manufacture are not inspected at the site when they're constructed, but off-site prior to delivery to the site. What is not factory-built housing? Common misconception is that mobile or manufactured homes and commercial modular structures are factory-built housing. These are not considered factory-built housing. These have different requirements under state and federal law. What role does the Development Services Department play in the factory-built housing environment? We coordinate with the state on projects that are submitted at the local level to the City of San Diego to review the plans. There are certain things that we can review and we cannot review. Those things that are done at the plant in terms of factory built manufactured housing, there are certain components that we would not review nor inspect once it's on site. So our scope is limited in reviewing plans to site-specific requirements such as the zoning. How many units can be built on this site? Are they utilizing affordable housing density bonus or complete communities or other types of housing programs at the local level? We can look at geology for the soils conditions of the site, fire, accessibility, and local amendments to the building code that are not adopted at the state level. We also inspect the construction, those components that are not factory built, below grade parking, any retail or commercial that is part of that development. We have seen a lot of mixed use factory built housing that incorporates perhaps a coffee shop or a restaurant or a community room with the factory built housing. We also inspect those connections to utilities on the site. And finally, our building inspectors issue the certificate of occupancy, and that's the point in which residents can actually move in and live in the factory-built housing. What we found at the local level is that we've had successful implementation because we've worked with industry groups. Some of the gentlemen are here with me today, and others, in identifying what are those rules at the state level, what are those rules at the local level, and how we can better coordinate and streamline the review process. The idea of factory-built housing is it's cheaper to build and it's faster to deploy. So if we can, remove time out of the equation, these units can get to market faster. We had two successful rounds of a stakeholder group where we discussed ideas on our plan check comments. When a structural reviewer identifies an issue, how does the architect respond to that? We look at when it's under construction, what if there needs to be a change during construction? What if there's damage to that unit that's brought to the site? How do we coordinate with engineering and right of way, things that are done outside of the property line, connections to those utilities, that sort of thing, to streamline and fast track the approval and construction of these. And then we discussed the affordable housing programs that the city of San Diego has and how this factory-built housing model can fit into those, just like any other type of housing. And then finally, we discussed inspections because that is a key component of this in terms of our inspectors to understand what they should be looking at on the site to final these projects. These are some pictures of some factory-built housing installations around the city of San Diego. As you can see, they're craned onto the site. And what we noticed is these go fast, they move fast. So impacts to surrounding neighborhoods and communities are often less than typical construction because these can be done in, a couple months or perhaps a weekend, depending on the size and number of units on a site. So understanding that, we had to learn about, well, traffic control permits are also required because if you're putting a crane on a site, you might have to have no parking signs, you might have to have one-way traffic. There could be potentially impacts during the craning in of these structures onto the site. So that's another issue that we addressed with industry to see how we could better streamline that traffic control permit because they have a timeline of we're bringing the crane on, we're moving the houses on, so we have to sync up our traffic control permits with their construction schedule. Here's some other units that have been installed. And these are the finished products. And the gentleman on the panel will also talk about some of the specific projects they've had in the city of San Diego. What's great about this is it's throughout the city of San Diego. As you can see here, there's over a dozen projects within San Diego, and these are all on infill sites. So some of them are smaller sites that can handle maybe 40 units, and they're taking advantage of the affordable housing communities projects programs that I identified. And it's been a successful implementation so far. And I'll pass it over to Matt to talk about some of his projects.
Okay, let me share here. Let me get the slideshow going.
Okay. As Matt's getting started, I want to remind everyone to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. They are ready to answer. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. So let me get the slideshow from the beginning. You guys seeing a bunch of bricks, red bricks, Lego blocks? Okay. So I'm here to talk as an architect to talk about the typologies of modular construction. Uh, we've worked on a lot of different types of modular projects. We've also worked on we've sort of worked with a lot of different manufacturers and to talk about modular housing and kind of what they're doing and how they're doing it and how to interface. So just to give you, and then I'm going to give one of our big examples that we worked on as a case study and walk you through all that. Um, so basically, there's a lot of different types of modular housing, a lot of different types of manufacturers. There's sort of these on the left, you can kind of see flat pack modular walls. The most common is the volumetric wood, and then the project I'm going to share is a volumetric container project. And then there's also what's now being called volumetric steel purpose built. So that looks and behaves more like volumetric wood. You just build it as you need it, as opposed to the container projects where you're kind of in a fixed module. Um, there and you're also limited by obviously transportation. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And so the different sizes you can see in the volumetric wood, that's a long trailer. You can do that's actually a double loaded corridor project, meaning there's a unit on each side of a corridor. And you can see that corridor right in the middle of that
Excuse
one right
me,
here. Yep.
excuse me, Matt, can you
Mhm.
share your slides again? They're not showing.
They're not showing. Oh, okay. All right. Let me try this again. Share. Okay, you're seeing my screen now.
Hang on just a sec.
Okay. It should.
Now we're seeing your desktop.
Okay, and now you should be
Now I'm
seeing. Now you're
I-
seing.
there we go. Now we've got it. This is
All
your
right.
title
Okay.
slide.
All right.
There you
Thanks,
go.
guys. Let me
Sorry
move
for
this.
the interruption.
No, I appreciate it. Let me move this down here. I only have one screen, so I have to put it all on one screen. Okay. All right. So we'll keep moving. So this is. Sorry. Let me get this off of here. I'm trying to make that as far off to the side as possible. Let's see. How about that? Okay. Um, so basically, these are the four typologies that I was talking about: flat pack modular, volumetric wood, volumetric container, and what we're now starting to call volumetric steel purpose built. One of the reasons the industry is going towards volumetric steel purpose built uh, or volumetric wood, you'd use them for different reasons, as opposed to volumetric container, is because the containers, while there's this sort of really great idea that you're reusing recycled material and there's things are all sitting out in the desert rusting away and they're putting them to good use, is you end up taking them apart and having to put them back together. So the industry is moving a little bit further away from that. And so this is the project I'm going to share with you guys here in a few moments. Our project is the one on the left coming off the factory line. The one on the right is an even newer project, which is this. You can see even within this particular manufacturer, they're heading towards this direction. One big difference you can see in this photo is on the left, you can see the chassis is sort of on the top, where all the mechanical and electrical and lighting is all sort of kind of connected that way. On the one on the right, the chassis is sort of on the bottom. So it sort of affects how you put it together and how you assemble it. But once again, the volumetric modular on the right, you can purpose built it, meaning you're not constrained by the 8 by 20 module of the shipping containers. When we first got into these projects, one of the things we noted, we looked at some existing projects and we noted that they were very, very messy. People weren't very thoughtful about how they put them together, and they sort of slapped on a lot of extra conduit and lighting and just all kinds of stuff. So we worked very, very hard, and you'll see later, to clean that up as best as possible. And I think it's important, as this industry is maturing, that's really thought through and carefully kind of organized. A couple interesting things about modular construction. That one of the things you'll hear is why this is important is if you're looking at the schedule here, a lot of projects you can do the site work while the modular project is being under constructed off-site. So you're actually taking it on the, you can see this long green line of 24 months of construction, and you're actually creating sort of cutting it in half and then stacking it, making concurrent. So in this case, on the project we're going to share here in a minute, we were able to manufacture all that stuff while we were building the podium for the project. Another important aspect for modular construction is a normal bank draw for any kind of construction project is typically got like 10%, 10%, 10%, 10% as you work your way through the project and you're buying more materials and you're getting more completed. So banks aren't used to the modular offsite factory cost where you have to buy all the materials all in one shot. And so you're asking for more money earlier. So it's a little bit of a different setup. However, some banks are becoming more comfortable with it, and some people are more vertically integrated and able to handle that way of working. But it is a different sort of financial sort of outlay. Other things that are important to understand while you're thinking about modular construction projects is location. And when I'm saying that in relationship to the factory you're at. Part of the conversation when you're looking at different modular manufacturers is transportation costs. Scale of the project is really important. Being able to understand if the scale makes the most sense, understand the program. You can't have a lot of complexity in any of your projects. It's got to be relatively straightforward and simple. Stack. That's why residential is a really good use for modular. Hotels is another one. Whether or not prevailing wage is a part of your project is potentially an idea whether it makes sense to go modular or not. And then understanding the local construction market and its costs. So the design process. So this is the project we're sharing here, and it's with Family Health Centers of the city of San Diego as a crow flies. Family Health Centers of San Diego. They're one of the largest nonprofit healthcare providers in the country, and the largest in San Diego County. They have a lot of I think maybe about 50 health clinics in San Diego County. However, they've recently sort of become very aware about how important housing is to health and how they're just intimately connected. And so they had a site where they had an opportunity, which is on El Cajon Boulevard, where they could put housing on one of their clinic sites. And so they decided to go all in on this project that I'm about to share, which was housing on top of their clinic, on top of parking, and also go modular. So they kind of jumped off a double diamond slope on their first housing project, but I think it was really successful. What was important here, just to talk a little bit about the design on this project, is the community plan actually calls for a bit of a street wall on El Cajon Boulevard, but in this particular site doesn't have a height limit. They just updated their community plan for higher density in this region. But we're still trying to, as best we could, to be sensitive to the multifamily and single family on the north. And so we broke up the building on the north side as best we could to really break up that massing. So when you're looking up at it from the backside, it's smaller chunks. Even at the same time, while the community plan actually asked for more of a solid street wall on one side. We also did that to increase airflow and create more public realm spaces and create better lighting throughout the project. On a programming standpoint, we had all these building blocks, basically. And one thing about modular is it does give you some very strong constraints to be able to organize your building. In fact, it was really helpful in this process, and I'll get to why here in a little bit. But so at first, we kind of had to understand the massing, and then we had to flow in the actual container pieces. As you can kind of see, those are containers stacking on top of basically a ground level clinic and 2 levels of parking above it. But you can kind of see how even with the street wall requirements, we tried to break up the facade as best we could so we can allow more airflow to go into the building. Here it is with now window patterning. Housing is more about patterning and texture than most buildings, just because of the repetition of the program. And here's the final rendering of it. Currently, so here's the project itself being laid out. And as Gary said, it goes really fast. We are able to do a floor a week And then, we drop a floor in a day, the entire floor in a day. And then we'd spend about a week sort of connecting things up and getting it ready for the next drop the next week. So when the time came, it was just in time delivery right out of the factory, dropping one floor per week. And then there's certainly stuff afterwards where we had to, there's still work afterwards, but the actual putting together the building went really, really quick. Here's the floor plans to give you a better idea. As on the ground floor, there's a big 20,000 square foot health clinic. And then on the fourth floor is where all the green space is and some of the public spaces. And then you can kind of see it's sort of an E shape facing north, as you can kind of see on the right. We have vertical systems are very important to be understand and organized throughout a site. It's critical that you understand how that flows, and in this case, flows into the garage and flows up to the roof. So understanding how the modular, particular secret sauce of any particular modular manufacturer works is kind of critical in organizing your building. Same thing with any horizontal systems. This one is a little atypical of most modular projects because most of them don't go straight up to the roof with all their mechanical and electrical. In this case, we were grouping them around a shared system specifically because we're trying to get to net zero and we're using a very highly efficient energy system with grouped up mechanical systems. So it's a little bit different. So we had to really track how that chased through the hallways. Here are the modular construction unit plans. You can see very, very simple. In this case, we had for the entire project of 172 units, we had one bathroom type and only two kitchen types between our our studio, our one bedroom, and our two bedroom projects. And you can very kind of clearly see it's 2 containers, 3 containers, 4 containers. So real small units here, you can kind of see them seam up together. Now, it was really important for us to think about high performance design. It was one of the requests and programmatical requirements from the ownership. So we needed to make sure that all the water and electrical systems and mechanical systems were integrated in the building. Right now, we're tracking at 86.6 energy reduction from baseline, so we're really close to net zero on this one, which is really hard to do on a tall building. So we're really proud of that. Now, when you have these smaller units, it's really important to do the best you can with light and windows. This is the same amount of glass as a typical residential multifamily project. It's percentage-wise, but we made it a little skinnier and a little taller and grouped it up in certain areas a little more. As you can kind of see, it lets the light kind of flow across the ceiling and the floor a lot better as opposed to a punch window in a room. So that was really important. Modular permitting process, just a couple more slides with this, and then I'll just zip through the pictures. As Gary was alluding to earlier, there's a state review of the modular stuff, and then a local review of all the stuff it's local. In this case, we had a huge podium, vertical stairs, things like that. There are modular projects that have modular stairs and modular elevators. In this case, it wasn't part of our program. This is 465 shipping containers. And as you can kind of see, here's this little elevation. The city is still the grantor of occupancy. They're still the inspector of all things local. So we had to have our local guys. In our plans, we had to very clearly explain who did what. So the state did review all the multifamily project, and they have inspectors at the factory. So we put this in our plans. Everything on the yellow column is the state reviewers and state inspectors. The column to the right of the yellow column is the state or the local reviewers and the local inspectors. So, for example, all the factory built components for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are reviewed and approved and inspected by the state agencies. It gets different when you go down to the next stuff where you're interconnecting the modules together. That's reviewed and approved by the state agency, yet inspected by the local jurisdiction. And on the last line there, you can kind of see if anything that's sort of site built is local review, local jurisdiction. So it's really important that we had a lot of these conversations before we got started with our plans, and we have this matrix in our plans. Fabrication, I'm going to zip through these really quickly, but so you can kind of see we deconstructed the project, the containers, you're putting it back in there. One really nice thing is you can do mock-ups with this thing. We did an accessibility mock-up to make sure before we built 150 bathrooms that they were fully accessible and reviewed by our accessible cast reviewer, and we made adjustments with countertops and things like that to make sure that went right. Here they are in the factory. Here they are wrapped up, ready to go. Here they are being placed. We're still replacing one more floor on phase one, which is in the background on the other side of the crane. And then here it is being dropped. This is the phase one portion. We're actually permitting phase two on the other half of the podium right now. And these are the some pictures of the units. Zip through these. And you can kind of see as the crow flies, it's just south of San Diego State on Elkhorn Boulevard, a couple blocks west of College Boulevard. And I'll pass it on. I'll stop sharing.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. Edu, you're up.
Awesome. First, thank you to you, Mary, and to Miles for inviting me to be here. Real pleasure. Also, thanks for coming to visit our projects last couple months ago. So I'm gonna open up with a video here that will help set the tone for what I'd like to discuss. Here we go. I'm gonna share my sound and I'm gonna do screen one. Okay, here we go.
Progress never arrives all at once. It compounds. Civilization's journey started with fire. It lit up the night skies and kept us warm. The wheel moved goods and people. Ships transported us around the world. Steam power gave few the strength to do what took many. Electricity powered our cities and our imaginations. The year is 1913.
They called it the car for every man. Henry Ford himself called it a car for the great multitude. It was functional and simple, like your sewing machine or your cast iron stove. You could learn to drive it in less than a day. And you could get any color you wanted, so long as it was black. When Ford first conceived the Model T, it took 13 hours to assemble. Within 5 years, he was turning out a vehicle every 90 seconds. Of course, the real invention wasn't the car, it was the assembly line that built it. Pretty soon, other businesses had borrowed the same techniques. Seamstresses became button sewers. Furniture makers became knob turners. It was the beginning and the end of imagination, all at the same time.
Housing construction in 1915 applied the modern advancements of its time. The world kept progressing, except for one industry. The construction process is stuck in 1915. It is time to catch up.
All right. So, can you see my screen still? Okay, good. All right, so a bit of a different kind of an introduction, but I think as I go through the presentation, you'll understand why I opened with this and why we kind of talk about not just our industry, but how it compares to other industries. Because for us, a huge part of our focus is to learn from other industries, like the automotive industry, and so I'll say some more about that. But essentially, we deconstructed kind of why has housing become so unaffordable? Why do we have shortages in housing production that are not meeting the needs of our population? And so then, as we started to understand that, we discovered that like the issue largely is about cost. So for us, modular manufacturing and modular construction techniques are a means to an end. About a third of the affordable housing that's needed in Southern California gets built and and that we think is not acceptable, and it's leading to a lot of the issues that our communities are facing. So yes, we're lowering the cost of housing by manufacturing, but doing the other things that I'm going to talk about here. But ultimately, it's so that we can produce new housing. And so just really quickly, just for some of you, you may have either seen some of these projects or driven by them. But just to profile three of the projects, I think two of these three were on Gary's slide, kind of showing where modular is getting built. There are a couple of others that we've built that aren't on this slide, but I wanted to highlight these three. The one on the left just opened last fall and is currently being leased up. And importantly, no public programs, no subsidies, just really by applying our lower cost delivery method and matching them with the city's housing policy. And I just got to tell you that the city of San Diego has the best housing policy in California, hands down. It's not even close. And every other city that wants housing in California is trying to learn from San Diego. But by matching those two, we're able to provide these units as essentially low-income housing, but again, without any subsidies. Then we've applied the same model in what most would consider a little bit more of a higher-end community in Grantville, and those we're doing 100% of the units at 80% AMI, which is low income. And that one, is currently under construction. Mary and Miles toured it, and 483 units. We set all of the modules for that in about a month and a half, and are very proud of that. And then we have our first low-income housing tax credit project that will be at 60% AMI across all the units as a blended average for affordability. So again, the modular is important. It's central to everything we do, but it's a means to an end. And the end that we're interested in is providing affordable housing that's attainable to more people. Even if someone could afford a much higher rent, we're happy when they come live with us and have that additional income to pay off debts or to travel more or to save for a home or for to start their own business. Going back to kind of the theme of the video, we can just look at how productivity in construction compares to the rest of, to other major industries. The car industry, for example, is in that light blue. And so there just hasn't been the type of advancement in construction when it comes to productivity. Even though all of these other industries that are kind of accessing technology, accessing economies of scale, and using really tried and true methods are increasing their productivity. They're lowering the cost of their products, making them more accessible to the masses. Whereas construction and housing has not done that. So where did we go wrong? How do we fall behind? And we think that it's really about the product and process. And so I'll talk about that more in a second here. But going back again to the reference in the video, you can see that as referenced in the video, another part of that is a cost that Ford had to build a new car in 1913 was about $850, and then they actually were able to see costs go down over time as their processes improved. So they approached the construction, the building of the cars as a manufacturer would, not as not as something that perhaps was done before that time. And we're using that same approach. And so you can see our modular costs for our one bedroom, for example, in 2022, when we first started manufacturing out of our facility, which is incidentally located in Orange County in the city of Yorba Linda. We've already seen a reduction in our cost and are projecting even further cost reduction as we're able to buy higher volumes of materials, and so having per unit costs for the materials to come down. We're more efficient in how we're assembling the units using advanced manufacturing methods. to do that. So there are a lot of different things that we're doing to bring that to bear, and that's leading to lower costs, which is, it's not something that's typically seen in our industry. Typically, people are assuming that costs are going to go up over time. So really, our solution is a borrowed solution. It's thinking about not designing new units for every project, but instead, really thinking about it as a product that we're manufacturing and then deploying into the market. We're rethinking our platform, and for example, we're fully vertically integrated, where we're doing the design and architecture, manufacturing, and construction all in-house. And then we're also not only the design builder, but we're also a developer, so we can also handle all of the development aspects of a project and pretty much do soup to nuts, or offer the design build services to third-party developers and deliver their project for them. And then also kind of really establishing best practices in manufacturing, which I'll talk about here in a second. So again, on the platform, I mean, this is just, it's atypical in our industry. I mean, there is such a thing as design build, where you have contractors with in-house architects, but then to add the manufacturing piece as well. Again, it's all of these disciplines that are in-house. The reason that matters is because they work together on a daily basis to solve problems that then get applied as just a standard process and product for that we build for future projects. And so then when you have all of the key disciplines in-house, the level of collaboration, problem solving, it's not really about pointing fingers ever. It's really about discovering and issues, solving them, and applying that solution to future projects. And then again, also as the development entity, then we could take responsibility for creating our own demand, for bringing in capital to finance the projects, and really having a single source for all of it. And then, of course, then offering the design build capabilities to third parties to build for them. One of the most advanced ideas regarding manufacturing is this idea of lean manufacturing. It's actually something that's based on the Toyota production system that really had Toyota become like the preeminent car manufacturer and surpass all of its competitors. Everyone always kind of like the sentiment when they first came out with this was like, wow, Toyota builds the highest quality vehicles. Since then, almost every car manufacturer has emulated their process. And what we're doing is we're taking the same ideas of lean manufacturing and bringing those not only into our manufacturing operation, but also into our construction and our architecture, and even in our administrative and kind of business administration, because like it's really about, like, at a very high level, two core principles: one of identifying and eliminating waste. Waste leads to higher cost. It leads to longer timelines. When you eliminate waste over time, then you're able to deliver at a lower cost and faster. And then also a culture of continuous improvement, as I mentioned, finding challenges, finding issues, finding problems, solving them, and then having those incremental improvements be applied over time. Matt showed a slide similar to this, just pointing to how our process leads to faster deliveries. I don't have to spend a lot of time here. This is a look inside of our manufacturing facility, just to kind of see, like, I mean, it's hard to kind of really go through in detail. There's a lot of there's some automation. You saw our automated saw there. There's a lot of efficiencies in how the units are being assembled and manufactured. Everything that you see that is happening here in the unit, there are work instructions for it. Those work instructions are constantly being updated and improved over time to lead to just better outcomes in terms of utilization of the labor, in terms of labor hours, which then ultimately leads to a lower cost of delivering the the housing, which of course could then open up the opportunity to charging lower rents. The other idea, big idea that we pursue is we don't find a site and build and design units for them. We have units that are our products that we have specific work instructions for every bit of scope that comes with manufacturing the units that you see here, and that's what we offer. When a developer comes to us and says, hey, we want you to build build a project for us, we show them our product line and say, okay, which of our units would you like us to use? These are our urban infill units, so these are a lot of the units that you would see if you were to come to one of our projects in San Diego. We also have a suburban product line with larger units, for areas where that's appropriate. But we have a product line, and inside of it, then again, these units are the same units in every project, and they get improved incrementally over time, which we focus on really efficient use of space. Again, because we only have a select number of products that we make available, then we spend a lot of time and energy into properly designing those units and ensuring that they're the best units we can produce, given the constraints of the dimensions of the unit that are inherent to the modular manufacturing kind of approach, where you need to be able to deliver the units on the backs of trucks, and so then the dimensions, as you can see here, are set at 14 feet wide, so that we can transport them on our highways. So also kind of looking at some of the interiors, creative use of space, additional storage, etc. But really looking for high touch, high quality finishes, without breaking the budget. So in closing, I mean, really for us, again, modular, it's a means to an end. It allows us to deliver housing at the speed of need, and in San Diego, certainly there is a tremendous need for more affordable housing. The city is continuing to grow, attract more employers. We need housing for those new employees. And also for the current residents of San Diego, a lot of whom are relegated to older housing that maybe don't have the modern features and finishes that we're able to provide them. So I'll leave it there. Have a lot more visuals if anyone's interested, but open to any questions.
Wow, that was terrific, Edu. I think I was at the Academy Awards there for a bit. So thank you so much. So we are now going to switch to questions, and I can see that you have generated some questions. I want to introduce you to my co question moderator, which will be Miles Pomeroy, who is also the co-chair of the League's Housing and Homelessness Interest Group. So Miles, are you seeing the questions?
I am, yes.
Okay, why don't you go for the first one, and we'll take it from there. We should run till about 6:30. We can go a little bit longer, but go ahead, Miles.
Okay, well, first question is, what is the price differential from reusing the containers versus new steel construction? And do you consider the reuse, recycle element? Matt?
Yeah, that sounds like that's headed in my direction. So,
Yes.
The shipping containers that are used in housing are very specific shipping containers. They can only come across the pond one time. They can't have any wet goods, only dry goods. They have to have they can't have like lead in the paint or formaldehyde in the plywood. So they're not inexpensive containers. So it turns out, and this is one of the reasons why the industry is moving towards the other direction, is it's less expensive to just build them. Now we are building them with wrong term, the volumetric metal fabrication is less expensive. We are using some more recycled materials, but I can't give you exact numbers because it's sort of wrapped into larger projects. But I will say it's cheaper to not do containers. That's why the industry is kind of moving away from it. This is kind of what we're understanding.
Okay, I'll take the next question. The question is, how many construction workers in San Diego County are trained to work on assembling factory-built housing, and are they paid the same as stick-built housing? So, not sure if that would be either Matt or Edu.
I have no idea of the
What?
number
Yeah.
of workers for this. I would say that um, for us, a lot of the scope is concentrated in our facility. I'd say about half of the total hard costs are on site, and so the podium that we're building and which is, whether it be a foundation or a podium, that's all, the same type of work, the same type of building materials and process that you would see in any other project. So for those, we're drawing from the same pool of subcontractors that are active in the San Diego market. And then as well for all of the non-modular scope that comes after the module setting, again, we're using local subcontractors and are paying, local, the same rates, the same amount to those subcontractors. We're not hiring the individual workers within the subcontractor scopes, and so that would be, I'm assuming it's the same rates. I would imagine it's the exact same amount, but
Yeah.
I can't confirm because we pay them, but we don't necessarily look at that.
Yeah, and I can second that. All the plumbers that were connecting the plumbing connections on site, and we're sort of talking about two different groups of people. There's the people doing the working in the factory, and then there's the people working on site once the modular components get to the site. But they were all just the normal trades doing electrical stuff, the normal plumbers doing plumbing stuff. There was no special training required, although they did go to the factory to understand what they would be coming on site a couple different times, the actual selected subcontractors, to make sure that they are tracking how it's going to come and what's going to happen. That may be less with Edu and it being totally vertically integrated. That may be less important, but our guys, but they're the same. They're the same folks. So
I believe the number of construction workers in the industry is around 75,000. Don't quote me on that, but that's probably pretty
yeah,
close to what we have.
and Gary, you're talking about the ones that are in the factory, right? Yeah.
Industry within San Diego, just the
Oh,
available
so
pool of
got it.
workers, not
Got it.
including those in the factories.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Okay.
So the next question is I think it's for both Matt and Edu. What do you think about the quality and long-term durability of factory-built housing?
Well, I mean, I will say this. So we get asked this question a lot, and when you look at what we're building, and I'll share a video again here just to kind of illustrate it. What we're building are fully volumetric modules here, and so you have material on every side. So then you really have between units, you have double the amount of wood material that really adds to the structural strength of the project, and so that really is a big deal. That adds to the durability of the building. Also, a lot of the structural requirements of the units are based on on them being able to be shipped on the road, which is even more onerous than like earthquake standards. And so, from our perspective, the durability is even greater than stick built housing.
And I can second that. There's not a big difference. I mean, in some sense, these projects still have the same amount of electrical wire, the same amount of copper pipe, the same amount of drywall. It is, it's not that wildly different from a stick built building. It's all about process, though. It's about how to compact time. And a lot of modular manufacturers will say, "Hey, our product is even better because it's we're building it in a controlled environment." And I think that's true in a lot of cases. So
Okay. Okay. The next question. is it your sense that factory-built housing is becoming increasingly used across the country? So this is getting your wider scope here. And it is noteworthy, the questioner asked that modular housing or factory-built housing is included in the proposed housing bill that's before Congress right now. Do you have any sense of what had contributed to being included in this bill?
To the first question, I can identify that we have about 2,000 units either built, under construction, or in review, which is a large number for housing units. At the state level, there is interest by certain assembly members to increase factory-built housing. So they will be introducing some new bills probably this legislative session and probably over the course of the next several years to address how these can be deployed faster. If there's better methods at the state level that they could be reviewing, what can we do at the local level? So that will be interesting to see if that moves the needle a bit. There are factory built housing projects throughout the country. I have not read the bill currently, but I assume it would probably be addressing some manufacturing issues to probably expedite that and promote it more.
Okay. All right.
I will say that because of the city's leadership, you know, Gary and his colleagues, and certainly the mayor and the city council, I mean, San Diego is getting a higher proportion of modular projects. It's certainly getting, you know, the highest proportion of our attention as a company, and we're one of the more active groups across the state. And so that speaks to really the leadership that we have in San Diego, which is really a big deal, and we certainly appreciate it very much.
All right.
So the next question, I think, is for Matt, and it's in reference to the project that you showed on El Cajon Boulevard. How many parking spaces are there for 172 units there?
Well, the city of San Diego doesn't require parking anymore, but I think the parking, there's two levels of garage underground too, by the way, so that you don't see in those pictures. I think there's more parking spaces than units and more, and then the required amount of parking for the health clinic. Now that just so everyone knows, the housing provider is actually Path Ventures, who's also a housing developer. So they partnered up, and they're the actual operator of that particular housing facility. And so the actual use of the parking garage is sort of negotiated between the two parties, and I don't really know exactly how many got what, but I don't think I've heard of any real issues with parking impact in those neighborhoods since we put that facility there.
I've got the next question. What locations would be inappropriate for factory-built housing in our area?
I would tell you that it's really hard to build on any areas with a tremendous amount of slope. It just makes having locating the crane on site, just bringing the trucks in with the modules on them, very difficult. So we've looked at some sites that have too much slope, and we've just passed on pursuing them because of that. Otherwise, I mean, urban locations, suburban locations, exurban locations. I mean, yeah, what really changes is perhaps the units that are being offered in certain areas. You can have smaller units because people just want to be in like that main central location. In other areas, you might need to have larger units, more restrooms, larger kitchens because it's more of a family environment. So it really works everywhere and anywhere outside of those types of constraints of the slope of the surrounding area.
Yeah, to Eddie's point, slopes, environmentally sensitive lands, biological resources, those types of things that might trigger a discretionary view would take longer than typically what they have in their timeline. Something in the coastal overlay zone would require a coastal development permit for new construction. So those are things that they have to be mindful of at the local level. Would that impact their schedule? In terms of zoning for it, This is no different than any other type of housing. So it's zoned for it, whether it's in a single family zone, if somebody wants to do one factory built housing unit, a multifamily zone for 2 units or 200 units. So it's to us, it's housing, and we're going to support it and review it appropriately.
So the next question has to do with uh, the segments of the market that factory built housing is aimed at. How much of the factory built housing is for middle income households, and how much is for low income households?
I mean, I could say for us, as for our first three projects that again are all unsubsidized, it's 430 units. We no subsidies, and so anyone can apply as long as they income qualify. And in looking at the incomes of the folks that are living in our buildings, typically mostly low income and moderate income. The low income individuals would qualify for a subsidized program elsewhere, but are either on waiting lists or prefer our building because they can afford it and qualify on the basis of their income. So we're seeing a mix of the two. For those that don't understand kind of the area median income percentages, low income is 60 to 80%, and medium moderate income is 80 to 120% AMI. And so we're appealing to all of them. We even have some folks that are above moderate income, in some of our properties that again are just paying a much smaller percentage of their income towards housing, which is also good in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, what's great to see with impact housing is they're providing naturally affordable. They're not using some of these programs that other developers can take advantage of. And if you're going to use 100% affordable housing density bonus or complete communities, then you're providing a percentage on site for affordable housing.
Yeah, but there's no real restriction. I mean, there's a couple of market rate tower projects in New York City that are modular. You know what I mean? So it's just if it's right for the particular setup and it's kind of it could be it's just housing. Another way to put it, right? So,
Okay, here's another question. I had this one in my own mind, and that is, can manufactured housing be varied in design to best fit in with the character of the proposed neighborhood?
I'll start with this one. So, um, most module manufacturers will tell you, the architects, well, they've got some modules to be most efficient, and then they'll let us play with the outside, you know, 24 inches and the facade and things like that. But I mean, a lot of the modular manufacturers that really, when this industry really got started, it was um, in sort of in snowy areas that had short build times. There's a lot of modular multifamily and Washington and Canada and so that's a completely different aesthetic than you see in San Diego and more urban environments, and it's got a lot more siding and it's got a lot more trim, and so yeah, I think you can go anywhere with it. You are constrained by the module though. I mean, if you're trying to capture the value of modular manufacturing, then really you only have a certain places to play with, but you can get pretty creative. Yeah.
And they have to be because they still are required to comply with the local zoning regulations, which sometimes have street frontage requirements, transparency requirements, height requirements, step backs, setbacks, those types of things. So they are fitting in with what the zoning code requires. If they're doing an affordable housing project, perhaps they get an incentive from a regulation that might impact their modular build.
Yeah, completely agree with both responses. I would just add that a lot of our buildings have a similar aesthetic, and that's really more of a branding consideration for us as a company than anything else. We're looking to do a sort of a timeless aesthetic that adds and contributes to each location it's in, but as they said, we can use different materials, different colors, different different configurations to create our designs. But But for us, we approach it, similarly across the buildings as a branding consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, multifamily really is about pattern, which is really the outside skin and not necessarily the insides of the building, which by their very nature need to stack and are stacked. So it's also there's another question about it's also good for hotels, or that's used for modular. Even some hospitals are doing more modular. We're looking at some of that stuff. So
To the untrained eye, these look like any other housing type of project. You would not know that it's factory built once it's all done.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the next question is asking about the national housing bill that's been introduced in Congress, which includes provisions for factory-built housing, and is asking if anyone can describe elements of that bill for factory-built housing or zoning changes or other legal elements. Does anyone want to comment on that? If not, I can.
I can only give one tidbit, and that was after attending a Hub Innovation seminar in September. The buzz was about being able to step away from the requirement to declare a chassis in these units, which in the world of this, I think is a big deal, but I didn't fully understand it. But that's all I know. Miles, you probably know more.
Yeah. There's also a bill pending in the legislature that would do the same thing, that would make it easier for manufactured housing to be classified as permanent housing if it's built on a foundation. I did read also that the federal housing bill would update the federal standards on which manufactured and factory-built housing are based. And it did include a provision that would provide zoning guidance for local jurisdictions to update their zoning, but that apparently was eliminated. And that's really all I know at this point. But certainly something to keep an eye on as it moves through the approval process.
Yeah, I haven't read the entire bill, but there are manufactured housing and then there's factory built housing, which are two separately, different items completely. So they're
yeah.
addressing all types of housing within the
Well,
bill.
yeah, when you hear that thing about the chassis, that's really talking about manufactured housing, which is your single wides, your double wides. The tiny home movement is sort of living in that world, and so there's this issue about the chassis being allowed in some, because most planning departments don't have those type of zones, and they're set up a certain way, so they're trying to unlock some of that. So I think that's what probably most of that's about. So factory built housing is more multifamily. Manufactured housing is mostly the single family and the onesies twosies, So
Great. Getting an education here. So here's the next question. What about storage, laundry, and noise in a unit? In some of these units that we've seen pictures of.
For us, we build in quite a bit of storage into the units. We also, in some of our buildings, offer storage in other parts of the building for rent, including bike storage in every one of our buildings. And we do not offer laundries in our units. That's a cost consideration for us. We find it far more cost effective to have a centralized laundry room, either one on the ground floor or a small one on every floor for convenience. So that's something that is really our decision based on us trying to hit a certain cost basis and ultimately appeal to a demographic interested in lower rents. In terms of noise between the units, I mean, that's one of the strongest selling points. When you actually are in one of the units, if you live in a unit, we typically hear from our residents that they don't hear their neighbors. Again, it's the double material, and then there's also a gap in between units on the sides and on the top and the bottom. So the noise isn't traveling through material in the same way, which means that you're not hearing people stomp upstairs, you're not hearing people having loud conversations next door. It's just the noise reduction is far beyond what the minimum requirements are.
Yeah, so these as an R2 occupancy are bound by the code of minimum STC ratings and sound and all that stuff. However, just like you said, because you just automatically have a double wall condition, which is the highest kind of wall rating we would actually specify as architects anyways. And then you have a floor and a ceiling as opposed to one joist that you share between a unit, right? Like a ceiling joist or a floor joist. So you have a floor joist and a roof joist. And so, yeah, you get these double wall conditions everywhere. And they're just, so that is one of the things, most of the times we say this is just like a regular housing project. That's actually something that's above and beyond a regular housing project in all modular projects.
Okay.
So I'm going to actually combine the next couple of questions into one. Uh, what's the cost differential between traditional versus modular housing? And is factory built housing available to individual homeowners who might want to build an ADU on their property?
I mean, we've been asked this question, hundreds of times regarding the cost differential. We've tried to calculate it in different ways. One way that we can describe it is we have submitted for tax credits on a project. It went up against 12 other projects. Our average cost, the total development cost was on average 43% lower than every other project on that list. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is we asked our cost estimators to take one of our projects, our 6440 El Cajon project in College area, and said, what would it cost to build this on site using traditional construction methods? And they use their cost estimating capabilities to estimate roughly a 23% cost savings. But that was something we produced. We're actually going to hire a consultant to just like answer the question definitively because it comes up so often. But there's definitely a cost differential. There's no question about it.
Okay. How about this one? Can they be sold like a condo? Like any of the units that we've seen tonight, can they be sold like a condo?
Sure.
You got to condo map them first, but yeah.
Yeah.
There's a process at the city. We review for the compliance with the State Subdivision Map Act, which would provide a condo map to identify the units to be sold off individually. We have not seen that yet, but I would anticipate that that might be an option in the future.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if that's part two of that question that Miles asked got answered about the single ADU units, but yes, there are modular manufacturers that focus on ADUs. And there's a bunch of them out there, and they're on eBay, and you can Google them. They're really easy to find. And they do like little, smaller ones that are meant to be dropped in someone's backyard, and there are a lot of them out there. And there's an annual tiny home festival that's it's like at the fairgrounds every year. All those guys show up to that one. But so that's just a different manufacturer. They're focused on that, not multifamily.
Okay.
So the next question is asking about funding. Specifically, is funding for affordable factory-built housing easier to attract than affordable funding for stick-built housing? I think they're talking about affordable in the rent restricted sense.
I mean, for us, we're finding that we are quite competitive, and when we pursue tax credits, we've only just started doing that last year, and we're 2 for 2 at this point for on those applications for projects that have gotten awarded. So one of the major considerations in any application is the total cost of the project, and because our costs are just going to be lower, we have a smaller need for going out and finding other funding sources, what's called soft funding, to close the gap on any project's feasibility. And so yeah, we definitely have a competitive advantage when it comes to funding when we pursue public funding. When it comes to private funding, it's oddly it's a little bit harder, just because a lot of investors and lenders, if they've never invested in a modular project, there's just an inherent level of concern, of a lot of misperceptions, a lot of horror stories from other manufacturers and developers that have used the typology that we need to overcome. So that makes it, I would say, a little bit harder when you compare two projects, apples to apples, same return profile, same type of location. It's just an extra set of hurdles that we need to overcome in the current environment, because it still hasn't proliferated as much as we'd like, and so that does make it a bit more challenging, but nothing that we haven't been able to overcome. But just to kind of answer it, honestly, I would say it is a bit more challenging.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one more question. We are going to come up against a hard stop here. Miles, you want to take a last question?
Sure. This is for Carrie, and the question is asking if you're seeing an increase in factory-built housing in San Diego, and related to that, do you have a sense as to how much, what segment of the market factory-built housing might comprise, and say in 5 to 10 years from now?
Great question. Yes, I just did the numbers, and it looks like over the past several years, we have over 2,000 either built, under construction, or in review, and hundreds, if not 1,000 more planned within the next couple of years from some of the manufacturers. A lot of that is due part to our stakeholder groups, our meetings with the industry, our publication of an info bulletin, which is in the chat, that lays out the process and provides some certainty that this is a type of housing that you can do in the city of San Diego, and we're going to assist you in getting it to market sooner. I would imagine in the next several years, we'll see probably 5 to 10,000. That would be, best case scenario.
Wow. What a way to wrap up. I want to extend my deep thanks for our speakers, for the time that you've given us, your expertise, and your perspectives. And a special thanks to the members of the League's Housing and Homelessness Interest Group for arranging this presentation. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of San Diego and the North County San Diego, we thank you for being here tonight. The League believes that democracy works best when we are informed and engaged. Tonight, we took a step forward in our mission to empower voters and to strengthen our community through dialogue, education, and advocacy. I think you're going to hear more about this space in the time to come, but thank you for joining us tonight.